Saleen Automotive bears the name of racing driver Steve Saleen, who, in the 1980s, had set up the company initially around tuning and reworking Ford Mustangs. As a racer himself, it's no shock that the powerful Mustangs he built found themselves racing and performing well, ultimately leading to Saleen expanding into providing aftermarket parts for a number of Ford models starting in the early 90s, as well as offering fully reworked Saleen variants of other Ford models on top of their bread and butter Mustang offerings. By the late 1990s, Saleen's Mustang race cars were top of the pile in the Grand-Am GTO championship, and as Steve puts it, he felt like the firm had done all they could with the Mustang. And the story goes that after seeing McLaren's F1 GTR Longtail at Le Mans, he was inspired to take the fight to Europe's best with an all-American supercar bearing his own name. The Saleen S7 has differing origins depending on who you ask. Designed by Phil Frank and developed by Saleen in partnership with Ray Malek's UK-based RML group, it is undeniably true that the S7 was created at breakneck speed. But the exact balance of responsibility and subsequent credit is a point of contention. Steve Saleen, a man nowadays not renowned for an infallible method of conducting business, seems to suggest that the S7 really was a Saleen special, and that he and his firm were responsible for the overwhelming share of the design and engineering work that went into the car, and that RML had been contracted as really nothing more than a constructor and a part supplier. However, the opposing story is that Saleen had actually originally been pushing hard to build a front-engine GT car, in line with the Don Paynos school of American supercar design, and it had been Frank and Malek that not only convinced him to move forward with a mid-engine layout, but also completed a significant amount of the initial technical design and engineering work, working with Saleen's staff on the exterior design, and not a whole lot else. Malek's story was later corroborated by Reeves Callaway, whose involvement is quite nebulous in and of itself. Much of the information about the politics of the Saleen S7's development was gleaned from Raphael Orlov's excellent and very entertaining article in Jalopnik about the car's potentially controversial development. The more salacious theory that the S7 was actually based on the Group C era Aston Martin AMR1 won't be discussed in this video, as that's not really why I'm here, and spoiler alert, it's pretty easily debunked. But the article will be linked in the sources document as usual if you want to check it out, which I highly recommend you do. Regardless of the true origins of the S7, one truth remains immovable. The car was exactly the right blend of fantastic and crazy. The late 90s saw a lot of upstart performance car companies. Pagani, Spiker, Noble, Ascari, and in the same breath right there with them all was Saleen, a Ford tuning house that burst onto the supercar scene with a 7-litre Ford V8 powered monster. All the numbers were exactly what you'd expect from an early 2000s low-volume supercar, boasting 550 horsepower in its original naturally aspirated guise, and available with up to 750 horsepower with the help of a turbocharged offering made available in 2005. And that variant had a claimed top speed of just under 250 miles an hour, or 400 kilometers an hour. While the S7's numbers were good, unfortunately in later years Saleen would run into some trouble with numbers of a financial nature, hitting money trouble and butting heads with journalists and the SEC. For a more sound approach to your business's finances, you should check out Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management software suite giving you all the tools you need to keep your business on the right track. Odoo's accounting app allows you to easily create an unlimited number of customizable invoices, easily track their payment status, and follow up with clients all through an intuitive dashboard. Through the same app, you can manage expenses and record transactions in real time thanks to Odoo's Smart Bank connection, allowing you to sync your bank account and consolidate your finances. You can even skip a bunch of the boring data entry with AI tools that will transpose invoice data for you. Odoo will also tailor the application to your local tax jurisdiction. With all the pieces together, Odoo consolidates and protects your company finances so you can easily get a grasp of your business's financial health and focus on building rather than swimming in a sea of scattered spreadsheets. I know that feeling. The best part? Your first Odoo app is free for life. So if you're just looking to up your accounting game, there's no cost to stress about. Not that the full suite will break the bank either, starting at less than €20 a month. So click the link below to save yourself some headaches with Odoo. Thanks to Odoo for sponsoring this section of the video. And now back to the story of the Saleen S7. As a road car, the S7 was wild enough, but Steve's intention had always been to race the car, and for that, the S7 mutated into the S7R. The S7R would be developed and built by Ray Malek's RML and would be constructed around a space frame chassis. The bodywork was carbon fibre composite, and the engine, originally a naturally aspirated Roush Racing built 7-litre Ford V8, was capable of pushing just over 630 horsepower to the rear wheels through a 6-speed transmission. GT racing in the American Le Mans series was split into two classes. GTS was the higher of the two, home to the more powerful and often better known GT cars of the time, while the lower class was simply known as GT. The Saleen S7R made its racing debut at the 10th round of the 2000 American Le Mans series at Laguna Seca. A single car was entered by Saleen Allen's Speed Lab, and it would be competing primarily against the newly introduced Corvette C5R, the veteran Dodge Viper GTSR, and a couple of GT2 spec Porsche 911s. At Laguna Seca, the S7R managed a 6th in class finish, representing 26th overall. Only 8 cars were contesting the GTS class, so it's fair to say the S7R's debut was perhaps a bit shaky, but being entered so late in the season, it was a great opportunity to get some track time and iron out the creases before a more comprehensive 2001 effort. They didn't contest any further rounds that year. Heading into 2001, the primary S7R runners in the ALMS would be Conrad Team Saleen, who would make their debut with the car in the second round of the season, the 12 Hours of Sebring. In the hands of drivers Franz Conrad, Oliver Gavin and Terry Borchella, they won the GTS class and finished 6th overall, a lap ahead of the trailing Corvette C5R. The S7R was suddenly a very serious machine. The following round was at Donington Park in the UK, a crossover round between the ALMS and the European Le Mans Series, or ELMS. Sebring had also counted towards the ELMS. This race saw a second S7R entry by RML, the car's UK-based constructor. It was that machine that took Saleen's second victory in the hands of drivers Bruno Lambert and Ian McKellar. It is worth mentioning though that this race only saw 2 GTS entries and both of them were Saleen's, so class victory would have been hard to scupper. That said, they did beat all the GT entries and were not far behind the tail end of the finishing LMP 900 cars, so I don't want to make it sound like the performance meant nothing. Round 4 was much the same, another ELMS crossover round, this time in Spain, again with little competition in GTS. Conrad Saleen won this one, as RML's car had to retire due to an oil leak 30 laps in. The only other GTS car in the field was also being run by Conrad Motorsport, and it was a Porsche 911. The remainder of the North American rounds of the ALMS were won by Corvette Racing and their C5R, with the lone exception of round 9 at Laguna Seca, where the S7R once again proved capable of beating the mighty Vet. Despite the admirable effort, however, and always keeping the C5R under pressure, Conrad Team Saleen couldn't stay ahead of Corvette Racing in the standings, ending the season 18 points behind them. The ELMS, with much sparser competition as previously mentioned, was a breeze for the S7R, with RML and Conrad taking first and second in the GTS team standings respectively. Though it's hard to get very excited about that one. The S7R also made its way to Le Mans in 2001, with Saleen Allen Speed Lab, RML and Conrad Team Saleen all fielding a single car each. The Speed Lab team qualified on class pole in LMGTS, but unfortunately the race saw them slip back, ultimately being overtaken and beaten by both the Corvette C5Rs, relegating them to 3rd in class and 18th overall out of 20 finishing race cars. The other 2 S7Rs were even less lucky than that, with the Conrad car taken out by an accident on just lap 4 and RML suffering a race-ending engine issue on lap 175. After a close battle had ultimately favoured Corvette in 2001, Conrad Saleen was surely hoping they could close the gap in 2002. Unfortunately, the C5R was just not going to let that happen, and they in fact widened the gap, only conceding a single round of the championship, and not even to Saleen, with the ProDrive prepared Ferrari 550 GTS Maranello taking GTS victory at Laguna Seca in what was otherwise a clean sweep for the Corvettes. The S7R was still competitive, don't get me wrong, it was consistently beating the Vipers, and often the smaller displacement Team Olive Garden Ferrari 2, but it was yet again only good enough for second in the standings, a more distant 73 points behind the dominant Corvette team. With the ELMS folding after 2001, there was no silver lining to be found on the European side of the tracks either. Le Mans 2002 hadn't been great to the S7R runners, and arguably, much like ALMS, 2002 was a bit of a backward step. They were again running 3 cars, one with RML and 2 with Conrad, with Speedlab and Graham Nash also attempting to enter with Saleens, but not being accepted. One of the Conrad cars retired on lap 83, and while the 2 remaining cars did finish the race, they finished 23rd and 26th out of the 26 finishing cars, representing 5th and 7th in their class. The class-winning C5R completed 23 more laps than the leading S7R of RML. ALMS 2003 wouldn't see a full season entry for the S7R, with Conrad Motorsport scaling back their North American program with Saleen. The races it did enter saw subpar results, which is unsurprising given the very little development undertaken since the last time it had lost. The S7R would contest a new championship in 2003 though, that being the FIA GT series. This would pit the S7R against a few new cars it hadn't raced against before, most notably the Lister Storm, as well as familiar foes in the Ferrari 550, Chrysler Viper and Porsche 911. FIA GT even saw competition from a race-ready Lamborghini Murcielago. Graham Nash Motorsport and Conrad Motorsport would field Saleens in the series, but neither would blow away the field, ending the year in 6th and 8th respectively in the team standings after the 12-race season, with a best finish of 2nd at Anderstorp for Team Conrad. Of the 2 S7Rs that entered Le Mans in 2003, neither finished. Graham Nash's car suffered an engine failure a devastating 22 hours and 44 minutes into the race, while Conrad had been sunk by a gearbox failure 15 hours earlier. It was becoming clear that if the S7R was ever going to find itself consistently winning races again, it would need reworking. It had stayed still for a few years while the competition advanced around them, and combined with a slightly troublesome power unit, it's no surprise the S7R had fallen down the order. To remedy this, Speedlab, led by Billy Talley, spent much of 2003 reworking the car, tweaking and modifying it to hopefully pull it back to the front of the field. The original Roush-built V8 was out too, with a new Elan Technologies unit in its place. Elan Technologies was owned by Don Paynos, who had also run into trouble with Roush engines in his own race cars and sought to build his own, instilling confidence in Saleen that they were in safe hands. The new cars were somewhat unofficially known as Evolution cars, and the first one built found an immediate customer in Asemco, who would take the newly sharpened machine to the ALMS. In 2004, the ALMS GTS field was made up of the Corvette C5R, Dodge Viper GTSR, Ferrari 575 GTC and Ferrari 550, Lamborghini Murcielago RGT, and of course the Saleen S7R. While the S7R was definitely improved over its previous self, the Corvette C5R was just too good. Corvette Racing won every round of the championship in 2004, and while Asemco Motorsport finished on the podium in every round, the S7R, even upgraded, was clearly no match. They came second yet again. In the FIA GT Championship, Ferrari's 550 and 575 Maranello GT cars had truly taken over. Saleen S7Rs were being run by RML, Vitaphone Racing, Conrad Motorsport and Graham Nash Motorsport, but reliability trouble plagued all of them, who were, to the best of my knowledge, all still using the older Roush-built engines. I couldn't find solid confirmation either way on this one, so please let me know in the comments if you know for sure which engine the FIA GT runners were using in 2004. But with all that being said, the year wasn't totally without success. Vitaphone Racing won round 3 at Manicourt in France, with drivers Michael Bartels and Uwe Altsson behind the wheel. They also won at Brno in the Czech Republic, again in the hands of Bartels and Altsson. And finally, there was Imola. Ferrari had been dominating FIA GT, and 2004 saw the introduction of the Enzo-based Maserati MC12. Maserati at this time was owned by Ferrari, hence the MC12's derivation from Ferrari's flagship Supercar. To prove the MC12's potential and give it some racing credibility, AF Corsa entered a pair of race-prepped MC12s into the FIA GT Championship. The cars would make their racing debut at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, more commonly known as Imola. My apologies if the pronunciation sucked. Not only was Ferrari chairman Luca de Montezemolo present, the story goes that Ferrari had gathered press to witness the might of the MC12 on the firm's home racetrack. Even in the event the MC12s lost, it would surely be one of the 3 550s or 3 575s that took the win, keeping Ferrari on top. If you couldn't already tell where this is going, that's not what happened. Michael Bartels and Uwe Altson, driving the brutish and bombastically American Saleen S7R, stole the show, finishing 43 seconds ahead of the leading MC12 after 97 laps, and embarrassing Ferrari on their home turf, in front of their home crowd, and in front of the automotive press. It was an upset, to say the least. Montezemolo commented on the loss, and to his credit was very gracious, stating, quote, "We were no match for Saleen today." On paper, it may have been one of many race wins in the FIA GT Championship for the S7R, but the 5th of September 2004 at Imola remains a highlight for the S7R, Saleen as a brand, and I'm sure for everyone involved in the project. 2004 also saw the return of the European Le Mans Series after a 2-year hiatus, kind of. It returned as the Le Mans Endurance Series, or LMES. For all intents and purposes though, it was the same thing, only with fewer rounds. Graham Nash Motorsport and Conrad Motorsport contested the series and unfortunately weren't able to find the same pace the Saleen S7R had shown in FIA GT, ending the season behind the 3 Ferrari teams and only scoring a couple of podiums. After a few high points in 2004, I imagine hopes were high that the Saleen runners would be able to make some forward progress. 2005, however, saw another distant second in the ALMS, no man's land results in FIA GT, and not even an attempt at Le Mans. The car's only successes were in the French National GT Championship. This wasn't entirely the car's fault though, as 2 of the teams who were committed to running the car ran into financial trouble, including longtime partner Conrad Motorsport, who were forced to downsize their racing efforts to save money. Vitaphone Racing also abandoned ship, not due to money trouble, but to race a different car, moving to Maserati's shiny new MC12, even in spite of its debut loss to the S7R. Despite a downturn in performance, and the fact the S7R was now half a decade old, new, race-ready chassis were to be prepared by French constructor Oreca, who had seen potential in the car in its upgraded Asemco guise. With the help of engineers from Saleen, including Speedlab technical lead Billy Talley, Oreca set about fine-tuning the concept and preparing new, race-ready machines. Most championships had, by 2006, adopted the more familiar GT1 and GT2 classifications for GT racing, leaving behind the more confusing GTS, GT, NGT, etc. The GT1 class in the ALMS had been whittled away to almost nothing, and Conrad Motorsport, the only team fielding the S7R, only contested the first round. Asemco had dropped out of the series to focus entirely on a Le Mans effort in 2006. 2005 had seen the introduction of 2 important new generation GT1 cars, the Corvette C6R and the Aston Martin DBR9. This left the older Saleen, even with its upgrades, vulnerable to obsolescence. Le Mans 2006 therefore would be an uphill battle for the single-car Saleen outfit. They nevertheless put on a good showing, scoring the car's best result yet at Le Mans with an 11th place overall finish and a class result of 6th. The more modern machines, however, were simply too tough to beat. Zakspeed championed the Saleen in the FIA GT Championship in 2006, landing wins at Brno and Budapest, handing them 4th in the championship, while Oreca's Le Mans Series outings yielded victory at Spa and Jarama, scoring them joint 3rd in the team standings at the end of the 5-race season. And it would be this that characterised the career of the S7R. It was never quite able to hold on to front-running status long enough to win a championship, but from 2000 through 2006 and beyond, the S7R had flashes of pace, enough to take away wins from some of the most highly decorated GT racing machines ever made. Oreca and others continued running the cars for years, even making some forward progress at Le Mans. In fact, 2010, a decade after the car's introduction, saw one of the Saleen S7R's greatest career achievements. Labre Competition, running an Oreca-prepared S7R, fought their way to LMGT1 class victory at Le Mans that year, finally fulfilling Steve's dream of winning the world's most famous endurance race and providing a fitting capstone for the racing career of one of America's most outrageous supercars. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you want more. We're closing in on 100,000 subscribers actually, and I reckon that plaque would be a great addition to this set. A big thank you to our wonderful channel members for supporting Automobilistic, for early access to future uploads, and to help us keep making motorsport documentaries like this one. Click the join button below. Until next time, goodbye.